which are pretty exciting. They certainly keep Lachlan and myself on our toes, most definitely. And some of these updates we've tried to simplify, and we'll be able to talk you through what this will now look like. So we think the latest update that's helping us embed it into our Interact 2 sites is actually a very useful one. But again, there's some things to know around the front end and the back end and what this might look like for our teaching and also from our students' angle. So there's quite a few things that I guess we're going to talk through today. And again, it's mostly Lachlan. So thank you, Lachlan, for this. And it's mostly going through, again, the mechanics of what this will look like and how we'll sort of step you through the process of how to go about the process ourselves. And just so that you don't get too concerned, there's no need to go about doing this straight away, but from session 3 onwards, so session 90, this will be ready to rock and roll in your subject sites. But it's sitting there at this point in time, isn't it, as well, Lachlan?
Sure is.
Excellent. So we'll take you through the process now of what this looks like. And hopefully you'll see that it's a really useful new addition to our Zoom suite of uses. Thanks, Lachlan. And sorry, I should say, Lachlan's put some links into the chat box there as well. So we've got our cheat sheet along with our PowerPoint for today as well, just to step you through some of these explanations. So please make sure you download those. They're very, very useful. Thanks, Lachlan.
Thanks, Prue. Yeah, look, I suppose a word of explanation around this, the fact that we ran 3 sessions leading in and plan to continue doing so prior to each teaching session for Zoom, and they're usually a basics and advanced, and then the learning and teaching focused Zoom session that happens at usually the timeline for that is at weeks -3, -2, -1 before the session starts, and then people can get in. That's our usual setup. What happened in the interim was that Zoom released some updates, and also the university's own Zoom rollout project progressed, and we were able to introduce the Zoom Blackboard tool, which was always on the menu for us adopting this tool, but we were taking some time to get there. So it's now in place, it's live and active, and it will actually be pushed out to every subject site from next session onwards automatically. So this session is for those of you who are keen to get off the mark and familiarize yourself with it before we hit the session. The cheat sheet is there for you to basically have a play yourselves in that space. We've got academics that are already using this tool, I suppose, that are keen and interested in getting familiar with it before next session starts. And if you wish to join those ranks, you certainly have the ability to do so. This won't take the whole hour today. It's going to be a relatively quick session, because the use of the Zoom tool in Blackboard does not replace your existing knowledge about using the Zoom portal, the back end. The 2 pieces of knowledge go together. So teachers basically need to be aware of using the charleston.zoom.us portal for signing in, because that's really the home of all of your recordings and your meeting information, etc. But this will change the way that you use Zoom going forwards. And I think you'll like it, broadly speaking, but that's not to say it's not without some adjustment required. So look, this is the document that I'll broadly be referring to, but it certainly takes you through enough yourself if you're completely ignoring what I've got to say, which is all good as well. So yeah, we are recording today, and I'm going to take you through the new Zoom portal tool. And as always, please feel free to drop stuff into the chat pod. Prue will respond, other people will respond in here, or people will pull me up and I'll respond to it at various points. So all are fine. Okay, so let's get into this. I'll move that out of the way. All right, so we're going to have an explanation first up, talking about the old versus the new. The old being the Zoom portal at charleston.zoom.us that everyone is able to go into. There has been an adjustment to the portal in recent times where this webinar booking form feature has been added. By and large, this doesn't apply to a lot of teachers needing to use the webinar tool, but if you're familiar with the town hall meetings, etc., that leadership have been running, they use the webinar tool, and the interface is slightly different. It's not really based around interaction at all. It's a tool really for presenting information and really putting quite narrow parameters around how feedback can be collected and moderated. But certainly everyone has the ability to request a webinar type room for specific purposes if you need to do so. And that all starts with this form in here, the webinar button via the portal. Otherwise, we'd be using the sign-in function in the back end. You guys don't see that stuff because you're not admins, but you certainly get hold of this meetings, recordings, etc., reports in your own portal. That's the old. Now we're going to have a look at the new. So the Zoom portal gets added to subject sites, and we have it in some subject sites hidden at the moment. Students aren't using it, but I want to give you a look at what it looks like, what it means. Down the bottom here, I've got an item called Online Meeting Zoom. It's always going to be called Online Meeting Zoom. When it gets pushed out to your subject sites, you'll see the same item in your nav menu. And if we go in there, it loads the tool automatically. What it's doing is talking to the Zoom portal in the back end and establishing who you are in relation to the subject. And what we have is this interface for instructors with 4 tabs: upcoming meetings, previous meetings, the personal meeting room, and your recordings. And over here on the right-hand side, the all-important schedule a new meeting button. So what this will allow you to do, the student view, just in contrast, does not contain a personal meeting room button. Will allow you to create your list of your meetings. They will all appear in here for students. The links to access those meetings will appear in there. And after the meetings are concluded, assuming that you've recorded them, the recordings will be made available automatically after the event for the students to access. So the whole point being, you don't have to go and manually get the information for it and provide it. It's all here up front, as long as you've set them up properly. Okay, that's broadly speaking what this tool will allow you to do. I'm going to give you a look at how we go through that process. It's really straightforward. I just want to put a caveat around how this works for different people enrolled in the subject. Instructors, full staff access, and the assistant grade access roles within the tool are able to schedule meetings in this tool. Students cannot. Okay, so that's the first point. Students are still able to use the Zoom portal and to create their own meeting rooms and use Zoom as they wish. But the actual Zoom portal tool, the Zoom LTI tool is, I don't want to say passive, but let's just say they can't create their own meetings in here, and any recordings that they made would not be accessible in here either. So they need to do everything through the back end. You guys get to use the front end. All right, so let's go through the process of adding some meetings. And if you look at the cheat sheet, for example, there is a suggested way of setting up that we've proposed right at the end. And that's what I'm going to go through at the moment. So I've clicked on schedule a new meeting. I'm going to give it a name. Keep in mind that the topic that you put in here is important, because every recording generated through this tool will take the topic name. So think about this from the point of view of the recording. It'll end up having a date and a time and the topic name. So in this case, if it was going to be my online weekly meeting, I could call it that, and I know that the students will end up getting a recording that says that and the date. And so I'm working back from what the students are going to receive. Don't worry about the description. It's not actually visible anywhere that's useful, so ignore that part. Okay, here we've got our when settings. I'm going to set this up based on the idea that I've got an online meeting happening every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. So let's go here. I'm going to say, right, Tuesday, starting today. It's going to happen at 8 o'clock at night. Okay, go for an hour. Doesn't matter if this says an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, etc. That won't impact things. But this is going to be happening for me every week over the course of the session. And I've got, do we have 12 or 14 weeks minus the breaks? Let's say 12.
14.
14, great. I'm glad I'm wrong.
And you've got 8 AM.
Okay, have I? Thank you. That was a test. So,
I passed.
so we've got 8 o'clock at night and it's a recurring meeting. It's going to happen every week, weekly recurrence, and I want it to happen every week on Tuesday for, in this case, 14 occurrences, because after the fact, I'm going to be able to delete the weeks where the breaks are from my list. That's why I'm putting in 14. Okay. No registration, no waiting, no password. All of the meeting rooms now have the waiting room feature enabled. Okay, so I'll leave that on. By default, host video and participant video is off. It's opt-in, the same way that we generally run our meetings. Now, this is the important part under the options here. I'm going to suggest you need to decide whether or not what's important to you is that it will record your meetings automatically, so you don't have to worry about it, or it's more important that your students can jump into the room before you turn up. This is the choice you need to make. For me, I generally deselect enable join before host, and I'm going to turn on my record automatically to the cloud function. The reason for that is if I left this on, it would mean the students could jump into the room, and the moment that they did, recording would start and it would capture whatever it was that they were saying, doing, etc. And that would all fill up my recordings tab with whatever, whoever had turned up at whatever time with their recording. So it's not really going to work. If you want that to be on, then turn off the automatic recording aspect, and you'll need to remember manually to turn on your recordings. Okay, you can't have both, really, doesn't work. Okay, by default, it will check record to the cloud. I'd suggest you leave it like that. Local recordings are for quite specific purposes. Okay, moving right along. So I've got mute everyone on entry and record automatically to the cloud. Let's look at these advanced options down the bottom. There's only two parts to this visible. One is if you're using the scheduling function, which most people don't use, but if you are, you have the choice to schedule either for yourself or those people who've given you scheduling rights. This is something more that executive assistants and school admin will use to book meetings on other people's behalf. Most of the time you'll be booking for yourself. This is the part that's probably the first big difference. You cannot add alternative hosts to your meeting from the front end, from this portal. If you want to add other people as alternative hosts, you can do it from the back end after you've created it from the portal. But this end doesn't allow you to add alternative hosts.
Sorry, Lachlan, I'm missing that.
Okay. Let me resize this slightly.
Yep. So you can't add people at this stage?
You can't add alternative hosts to the meeting. So let's say if you've got a guest speaker coming in who needs to be a co-host, you can't do it through the booking end at the front. But remembering what I was saying before is that everyone in this subject who is listed as an instructor will have co-host rights to this room just because they're already an instructor in the site. It happens automatically. So it goes back to the subject site and says whoever else has got full staff access or instructor access will automatically be able to access these rooms as a co-host.
I just have a subject in which I and another colleague are both lecturing. I did the first half of the session. He'd done the second half, but he couldn't get into it yesterday. And yet, when I go to my profile, he is listed as a co-host.
Right. Well, we probably need to look at that separately. So maybe if you want to email me the details, I can have a look at it.
Okay. Thanks, Lachlan.
No problem. All right. So yeah, what it will mean is that anyone teaching into the same subject site, because they're already added into that subject site in Blackboard, they'll have co-host access to your meeting. So I'm going to save this and we'll see what it looks like in the tool. Okay, so it gives me a summary. Here's the first probably aspect of this tool that I'm not a huge fan of. You need to get used to using the breadcrumbs at the top here above the meeting, because there's no way to navigate back to your subject menu apart from this. Right? I can't see anything else that will allow me to go backwards or close this. So I need to click on that. It will reload the page again. Right, I'm back into my subject site. I'll open up my online meeting Zoom item again. It'll now launch the tool, and what we will see in here, this is what the students will see, is all of the meetings with their dates and their ability to join. What I'm actually going to do is switch over to the student view so you can see what the students will see in here. And this is quite nifty. Turn this on, student view. As long as that item's not hidden, Lachlan, which of course it is. One moment.
Sorry for laughing.
Happens every time, show the link. Okay, now student view. There it is, online meeting Zoom, come on. Okay, so first thing, 3 tabs, not 4. They get all the meetings coming up. They get the dates, the times, the title, meeting ID. They can either click to join, or they can actually get the full invitation card, which will give them the dial-in information if they're calling in on their phones and they don't have access to the internet as well. So they actually get the dial-in information. If you've used this before, it's quite handy for people that don't have access to the internet but still want to join meetings. You don't have to provide any of that information manually. It's all available through the tool. Okay, so they get access to each of those. Once this date and time passes and the meeting finishes, it'll be added to this previous meeting list. It'll disappear off the front page and move into here. After the meeting's concluded, if there was a recording, the students will get access to the recordings in here. They can click on it. At that point, they get access to the video recording and the audio recording. Okay, that's it. They can play it. And from the moment that they can play and watch that video recording, let's get into that. I don't think I actually recorded anything there apart from just capturing something. Then they can download the file from there themselves. So you don't have to provide anything for them. It's automatically provisioned. Okay. However, so we've got video, we've got audio taken care of. No transcripts. If you want the transcript to be provided to the students, you're going to need to find another way to get it to them, which would mean going into your back end. So I've just created those meetings in the portal, the front. If I look in here now, there's the one that I've just created. It's in my back end as well. And I could access the recordings from here as well. So it's all available through the portal as well as through the subject LTI. But this is just a more refined set of options for dealing with it. Okay, so that's what the students are getting hold of. They get the video, they get the audio automatically. I'll hit the back arrow this time round. So that's the student view, and that's it. You just have your meetings. If you've set it up with that weekly recurring model, it's taken care of all the information that we used to manually have to put into the table. If you remember the table in the old Zoom online meeting Zoom item that had the weeks, the days, the times.
Terrible.
You know, not the greatest. Now we don't have to do that anymore. You just set it up once and it's available for them. All right, I'm going to get out of the student preview. Yep, the recording is automatically available as long as you check that box when you're creating the meeting that says record automatically to the cloud. I might stop there for a second, Prue, because there's been some questions about local versus cloud perhaps and others. Do you want to throw some of those at me?
Yeah, great. Thanks, LK. Yeah, there's a lot going on in the chat box. Quite a few questions around why would we want to record to the cloud or why would we want to record locally? And I guess there's a lot of things we could say on that topic, dependent on teaching style, on how you'd like to share, what you'd like the output to look like for your students. I think the easiest option is probably recording to the cloud, because Zoom will then automatically pull that recording link and put it into this fantastic LTI tool. So that's the easiest way to share it. But if you wanted to record locally to your own computer, then you'll need to consider how you share that file. It may be embedding it into your i2 site. It may be uploading it into Panopto and then embedding it into your i2 site. So there's a few things to think through. Do you have extra things you'd say on that topic as well, Lachlan?
Yeah, look, mostly people that record locally have got a value add in mind, another use for the recording. So either they want copies of it on their own computer for their own backups, or they want to put it into their learning materials somehow, or they want to provision that video file somewhere else, like stick it into YouTube, for example. There's always another intended purpose for the recording, usually when people download things locally. The problem is that ideally we want recordings made using Zoom to be available to the students through the subject site and with as little fuss as possible. This tool, using that record automatically to the cloud option, takes all the fuss out of that process. You turn up at the time, you attend the meeting, it's captured, it's available to the students. That allows you to focus on, I guess, the important stuff rather than having to remember to cross the T's and dot the I's as such. So by and large, most people are recording to the cloud. Whether or not you choose to do it manually or automatically is a separate question for you. Yeah.
Yeah, great, Lachlan. And just while we're talking through the questions, there's been some discussion around a lot of our subjects will have a teaching team teaching into them. What is the best way to be setting up our site so that we might have all of our lectures and Zoom room links listed for our students, but they might be taught by different staff members? How can we do this? Because we know that Zoom doesn't really like us multitasking. We can't be in two places at once. What would you suggest there, Lachlan?
Look, because you're going to have everyone in the subject site attached to this room as an alternative host, the tool takes care of that. It also means that you don't usually get the same conflicts in terms of Zoom rooms being already in use or the host license already being taken up, because you've got other people taking that load off, alternative hosts. So that means if you've got other people teaching into the subject site and you're somewhere else, them going into the Zoom room will allow it to work without issue. Okay, you're not going to get a message that says the Zoom room's already in use. It actually makes it a lot easier than you having to manually worry about putting in alternative hosts into the meeting to alleviate that problem. So it's fine. I think it's actually going to make using merge sites, for example, and teaching teams a lot easier. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about that at this point in time. Yep.
Great.
Okay. I will continue on with a few bits and pieces and then we'll stop for some more questions, unless you've got a burning one, Prue.
No, I'm just going to make my way through this chat box at the moment. It's absolutely on fire today, but
Okay.
I will try and pull together the ones that are asked the most and we'll try and answer them live towards the end as well. So thanks, Lachlan.
Okay, great. Okay, so what else can I show you? I'm going to go back to the subject site and re-enter, and you'll find that you may have to do this a few times. It's a bit fiddly in that respect. The tool seems to like to refresh itself every 15 minutes. So if you're sitting in there for more than that, you might be prompted to refresh the page. Keep that in mind. Okay, so I'm back in the host view that gives me upcoming, previous, personal, meeting room, cloud recordings. Okay, a few other additions, extra information. If you have got other people, other instructors that have created meetings for specific purposes in here, you can filter the list to just show the ones that you've created. In this case, I'm the only one that's created it, but let's assume that there are multiple teachers in the subject site. Some of them might have created meetings for specific purposes. You can filter that by using this checkbox. At that point, if there's a number of them, you can actually also show the meetings by whichever host created them. So there are some filter views available for the instructors. Over on the right hand side, there is 3 dots over next to the schedule a new meeting function that says import meeting. What this allows you to do, if you have existing meetings in the Zoom portal that you want to use or bring into this list, you can import them. All you need is the ID, and it will bring all that information across for you and for the students. Okay, so for those of you who wanted to, for example, maybe play around with this now, and you've already got a set Zoom room with a set link that you've been using, you could import that meeting into this list using this function. Right, so if I went into the back end, which is not there, let's try there. Okay, so I've got, let's say the one that we're in now, the Zoom Blackboard integration meeting. There's a meeting ID, 6538. Oh God, I'll never remember that. Snip. Give me that. Okay, back in here, I'm going to import a meeting from the three dots. I'm going to put in that meeting ID, 653-8995-8084. Import. It will take that meeting information from my list, and there it is. It's now part of my setup. So if you've got meetings that you've created in the back for other reasons and you want to bring them in, you can do that. If this has any other recordings attached to it, previously, they will not come across. It will only be recordings made from the point that you bring it in. Okay, so pre-existing objects, etc., don't come across. It's only from the point that you bring it into the tool that those recordings will start appearing in here. And similarly, if you've got meetings that you want to get rid of, we talked about when the breaks were, for example, wanting to remove some of those meetings, you would find the date and the weeks that refers to. So let's say that these two happen to be the ones that are in the break when there's no meeting. Over on the right-hand side, delete. Just this occurrence, or get rid of all of them. Just this occurrence. And off we go. It's removed from the list. Okay, so it's really straightforward. Okay, you also have the ability to view all of your meetings and recordings, which you would normally find in the back here under recordings or under your meetings section. You can view all of them in here, but that's not going to have any impact at all on what the students see. The students will only be able to see meetings that you've either scheduled or imported into here. Okay, a few common questions we get around this. Can I change the name of the meeting topic after the fact? You cannot. Not from here, not from the front end. You need to go into the back end. And at that point, you would bring it up and you would edit the meeting and change the detail. Okay, so you can do, the answer to most of your questions around this is going to be yes from the back end. The front end has limited functionality in terms of what you can and can't do. Okay. Prue, shall I throw back to you again, see what else is coming in?
Yes, while I'm madly typing away. Yeah, look, there's been lots of questions, which is really great. I think it's awesome that we have an opportunity to ask all these questions and try and get some quick answers for you all. So again, still talking about cloud recordings and some of those differences, but also I think it's just following on from what you were just saying, Lachlan, about the difference between what you can do in the LTI tool compared to what you can also do in the web portal. And I think it's just important to remember that there's so much more functionality, as Lachlan was just saying, in the web portal. So although the LTI tool is great for setting things up, looks fantastic to share our recordings with our students, if you wanted to go through and edit things or change things, you can also do that through the web portal, where it allows you to have a few more options in that area as well.
Yeah.
Quite
Absolutely.
a few questions there. Also a few points just around people also saying that Zoom files can be really large. So if you're recording to your local computer, just to keep things like that in mind. Karen had a really good point there as well about downloading to your local drive and then trying to upload into Panopto. Sometimes the files are too large for that purpose. So it's really having a good think through what the purpose of your online meeting is, why you're recording it, and how you want to share that with your students. How do you want them to access that? Is it embedding it into your site, perhaps, or is it just sharing it via the link in the LTI tool? So thinking about the sustainability, I guess, of that as a teaching resource.
Look, it's a really good point, and I think it's probably a good segue to talk about the teaching implications. Obviously, people have already been doing that, but we've got some, I suppose, some overt points to make in that space. So if I bring the slides up for a second. Okay, as I mentioned before, this tool is going to be automatically available to each of you in your subject sites from next session. It will be under your community section at the top, towards the top of your navigation bars. Okay, so the Zoom tool will be there, it will be on, and it will respond to you clicking on it, it will look at your settings in the back end of the portal. And if a student clicks on it, it will respond to them in the same way. So they will be available for everyone to use. But in the cheat sheet, the very first thing that the cheat sheet talks about is adding the tool to your subject. This is for those of you who want to have a play with it now. Basically, next session, you won't have to worry about this. It will already be there in the subject site. But if you wanted to provision it now to have a play around with it, you can absolutely do that. And the way to do that is very, very simple. It'll take you about a minute by adding another tool link to your nav bar. Okay, if you wanted to put it into an org site or use it elsewhere, you can certainly do that as well. All right, other implications. As we keep mentioning, it's important that you're going to need to be familiar with the front end, the LTI tool, and the back end, and the affordances of each, like basically what you're going to need to do if you want to change things, usually in the back, and what students will have available to them in the front. And that will also impact what Prue and I, deliver when we run our PD prior to each session as well, because we can't just have a Zoom portal only PD session. We really need to talk now about the fact that it's the portal and the LTI tool together working in tandem. So that's going to have an impact. What about instructions for students on how to use this tool, how to access it? Because the LTI tool itself, as we looked at a minute ago, there's no other information in here. There's no content areas that introduce it, even provide any other information. It's just on and in your face. So that means that the information for students, such as the student cheat sheet that they got in the past, needs to go somewhere else. Which is a great segue for me to talk about another object going into the subject sites called the Getting Started item, which actually is going into each, and it has lots of areas to do with, readings and other bits and pieces. But one of them close to the top is about Zoom. It's just a blurb that talks about the tool and also gives them a link straight to the cheat sheet. So that will be going into the subject site as well automatically. So it's not that that information is not available, it's just that they're getting a little bit more organized to stop you guys having to manually provision this stuff somewhere, somehow. Probably one of the biggest items that we haven't talked about yet is, what about those other files that you might provide in a meeting? If you've got slides that you used in your Zoom meeting and you provide them to students, how do we do it? Because it's not available here anywhere. If we look at the recordings tab, all we got was a video and a video recording and the audio file. No attachments, no ability to put any text in. Now, these features may very well be coming from Zoom. They're very quick to put in more updates and changes, but it's not there at the moment, which means we're going to need to find another place to put meeting files. So the last point that's on the slides there is this might be an opportune time to rethink maybe how we're using the discussion board for those of us that don't use it at all. And potentially we might need to put in kind of ad hoc supplementary objects for meetings as discussion board threads. That's one option. You might have others. If you put them into announcements, for example, people are going to need to go fishing back through their announcements to find things. If you were to put slides or transcript files, they're the two obvious ones I could think of. You might be able to think of others. You might end up creating another content area in your navigation somewhere to add those objects. So I suppose keep in mind that most of these changes have the broad kind of goal of refining the number of items in the nav bar so that students don't have to scroll for half a kilometre to get to the objects they want. But if you need to add an item, you need to add an item. So that's up to you. I'd suggest the discussion board might be a good place to start in thinking of provisioning extra items from Monday night's online meeting or whatever the case may be. But obviously the discretion here is yours. So if you wanted to put them into the resource folder, for example, completely and utterly up to you. Sanani, that's up to you. These are just tossing around some ideas at this point. So look, at that point, I'm going to throw it over to you guys entirely. If you've got questions in and around this, by by all means, I'm happy to respond to those. But that's it in terms of what I was going to show you with the new tool. Thanks, guys. Certainly going to hang around for a little while. So go ahead. Phil, have you got a question?
No.
All good?
I tend to put all my things into folders in resources, topic by topic. So I have my PowerPoint slides, my Zoom lectures, and anything else that might be relevant for that topic, so that from a student's point of view, they come in, oh, I want to look at topic such X, and they just click on that link and all the resources are there for them, including their Zoom meetings. Okay,
so you organise it all within the learning materials, right? Fair enough. Yep.
I couldn't think of any other way.
It's whatever works, absolutely.
I have a question, if it's possible.
Go ahead. Who am I talking to? Martin, is it?
I put it up on the board, but I don't know. There's been so much traffic on there. I'm probably struggling to keep up. If I clone my previous subject into the subject outline tool for 2020-90, will these new issues be, things be front loaded onto it automatically, or do we have to go somewhere else to get it?
No, that's a really great question. They will absolutely be there for all subject sites. They'll be pushed out, I think, later in for this week. So what that will mean is that all of the subject sites for 90 and for 30 for next year, 2021-30, will have those objects pushed into the nav bars. So that will, whether or not you're cloning or bringing in others, unless you manually delete them, they're going to be there.
Brilliant, thank you.
Pleasure. Simone, did you have a question?
I do. This is awesome. Thank you. I really like it. Does this mean that if I set up, so if I list myself as an instructor for subjects where I've got sessionals teaching, that I could set up their Zoom rooms for them?
Yes, that's exactly what it means.
That's good news. Thanks.
Pleasure.
Lachlan, it's Monique here.
Hey, Monique.
Hi. I put something in the chat, but there's a lot of stuff there. I received an email, I can't remember if it was yesterday or Friday, from Zoom about they were sharing my personal information. Do you know anything about that?
I don't, but I'm happy to follow it up. I can take that back to the project group today.
Unfortunately, I deleted it, but what it said was that Zoom had my personal information and kind of a bit like with Facebook, you know, kind of thing, that they were, according to the privacy agreement or whatever, that they were able to sell off if they wanted my personal information. I wasn't sure if it said it came from Zoom, but I wasn't sure if it was a junk one or not. So I actually did delete it, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's an interesting point. I didn't get one, and I'm seeing some shaking heads going on, but I can also see in the chat pod some people got it, which leads me to think probably scam, and deleting it sounds like the right way to go. But
I did check the extension, because I always check the extension to see where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And in the extension, it did have Zoom. So you know how they usually have a junk, extension on them when you have a look at them.
When you open it up, yeah.
This one actually had that it was from Zoom. And I do notice a few people in the chat are saying that they received it, deleted it too. I just thought I'd raise that because I was a little bit concerned about it.
Sure. Okay, I'll check it out. I think the other thing I'll point out as well is that when you finish making recordings in Zoom, you will continue to get an email notification saying that the recording's finished. The difference, I suppose, in terms of the workflow now is that this will automatically provide the recording in here without you needing to go and do something about it. So it's just really a courtesy at that point saying the recording's finished, and now you can assume that it's also gone into the recordings tab. as well, so you don't have to go and chase up the recording.
Lachlan, can I ask something, please?
Sure.
I think that part is really, really good because it can come depending on how long the classes are, hours and hours later. And you have to really keep an eye on it when the email comes and then you go and do all those. Only thing is that we probably need to be a little bit more careful at the end that when we stop recording, because sometimes I do have to cut the end because students start ask personal questions, which keeps on going in recording. Then I usually go and cut it out because that's not for everybody to hear. This time it will be automatically available very quickly once it's getting published. So that part is probably be more vigilant about. That's what.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good point. On the one hand, we've got convenience that we're looking at, and for the students, you know, they'll be the beneficiaries of that, but we've also got that, I suppose, the lurks and perks aspect, that if the recording's just going, it has no discretion about what it does and doesn't capture. So needing to be able to turn that off. I mean, that was, I suppose, always the case if you've started a recording and needing to stop it. So, I mean, I'd like to say that we generally try and remember to do that, Prue, but, you know, I'd be lying. Getting towards the end saying, right, I'm going to stop the recording now. And people ask things that are a bit more sensitive. But it's a good point. If you can make that part of your sort of general delivery approach with Zoom, that you hit a certain point and say, right, I'm going to stop the recording now, but hang around for any other questions.
Yes.
That would be a pretty strategic way to handle it. And
keep
in mind, I'd say the other thing I'd keep in mind is that for those of you using the top and tail feature with your Zoom recordings to trim, you can absolutely still do that through this tool. So the recording, I created this one. If I click on it and as the host who created the recording, and I go to play back the video file, it will open it in the browser. And what I'm going to see down the bottom once it loads are the scissors for topping and tailing. So I can still perform that trimming in here through the LTI, but you need to keep in mind that if anyone's downloading the file, they're getting the original. They get the raw original file. They do not get those trimmings and changes added to it. That will only impact the playback of the file in the browser.
Yeah, I have stopped allowing students to download because I've always found students keeps on asking personal questions. And I don't sometimes know that it has gone personal. So because I can't edit, in Adobe Connect, I could have edited those parts out easily, which I can't do anymore in Zoom. So it sort of like has been quite consistently, I had to go and chop up the end. So that's the reason I stopped allowing students being able to download. They can only listen to browser.
Yeah.
That may not be a very good practice, I agree, but that was mainly the reason, the privacy thing. It's quite difficult, particularly, you know, students, they don't remember that, okay, now we are recording, so stop asking personal question. They don't remember that way. So, you know, sometimes I think more sensitive than they think it's sensitive because they're giving away things that I think other students should not know. You know what I mean? It's like a very gray area, trying to balance it out. That's all.
Yeah, look, it's tricky from both sides, isn't it? I think the more obviously explicit that you are and following that general sort of pattern that serves to everyone right, as usual, if you've got questions of a personal nature, say them for the end or get in touch with me. We'll stop the recording once we hit, you know, kind of whatever the 45-minute mark or whatever the case may be, or get in touch with me. But also just, you know, repeat, redo, keep following that same pattern, keep reminding them that that's the way that things are going to roll so that they don't do that, because we also generally have a responsibility to provide our media in an accessible fashion. And so what that means is that recording of files, like downloading locally at when people have access to the internet, is an important affordance that we try and create with this tool. So that means the ability to download audio and video. I'm not going to say it's policy, you know, mandated, but we're not far away from it. There's that point that sort of says that materials like lectures, etc., do need to be provided to students in a way that acknowledges that not all students will have consistent access to the internet. They might not have access to quality internet speeds, etc. And so we get students that are going to places where they're going to download files, or maybe they'll subscribe to podcasts, etc. at one point, and they want the ability to download. So I understand the need and the sensitive nature of that problem, but there's also the other side as well in terms of our own obligation.
Yeah, I know, Lachlan. It's kind of like probably we may get more experience with it. I was actually thinking about, well, I have done it recently, put a slide like the way you guys do, QA session. So I put that at the end, and then that time I can stop the recording and they can ask me anything. And if there are things they have asked, which I think is beneficial to the whole cohort, I can put it up in the discussion board or something.
Yeah.
It's just a learning process, that's all. So I was listening to, I'm thinking I need to be now even more careful about what goes on at the tail end, that's all.
No, I think it's a really good point, Rahina. Yeah, absolutely.
And thanks, you guys. Very, very well done. Easily understandable, which is what I'm after, dummies. So thanks again. Bye, guys.
Yeah, well done. Prue, was there something in there about making recordings unavailable, or people want to know how to do that? Is that what's going on?
Just a few questions around, can we delay the recording coming into the new LTI tool, or can we make them unavailable? And I was just having a look at, I can't find a way to make them unavailable from the back end, but what do you know, Lachlan? Is there a way that we could do this?
Yeah, you can make recordings unavailable from the back end, absolutely. I'll show you how to do that. You can't from the front. You can't do it holus bolus for all recordings. You need to do it at an individual level generally, and I'll show you how that's done. So I'm in the back end here. If I go to my recordings tab, we find a full list of my recordings in here. And if we go to the share settings for a particular recording, brings up a summary, and there it is, viewers can download. At that point, you can toggle that off, but that's done at an individual recording level. So if you get recordings that are sensitive for whatever reason, or are going to need some work on them, or whatever the case may be, yes, you can toggle this off for individual recordings. Yep. After the fact, but this it does work pretty quickly. As soon as the recording's been published, it's going to appear inside this tab, in the cloud recordings tab. Yeah. Okay, Celia's got a question about seeing how many people have viewed the recordings. Through the front end, you can't. Through the back end, you can go to recording information. So if you click on the recording itself and then scroll down, once it loads, you're also able to see recording analytics. There's a link above it. And then you need to determine the time period that you want to get the analytics for. But keep in mind, if you're after specific information more than just views, you're not going to get it from here, because by and large, most people accessing it are going to be guests. And I'm going to have to reject that one. Yeah, so it's general in nature, views only. Yep, thanks, Celia. I'll stop the recording at this point, but I'll hang around obviously for a little bit.